Hi, my name is Mike Arnold. On the 8th of January 2014, The Times, that's the London Times, published an article regarding myself and the murder of WPC Yvonne Fletcher. Unfortunately, what they published is a gross misrepresentation. It's a gross misrepresentation because they cherry-picked, very selectively cherry-picked, only what happened at lunchtime. So it's a gross half-truth. The truth of the matter is that we, GCHQ Cheltenham, and you can read about this or you can read what they published, and that is the Government Communications Headquarters, that's the British equivalent of NSA. I was then a Crown civil servant and an employee at GCHQ Cheltenham. What they didn't publish back in January 2014 is how I was ordered to be in my office at lunchtime. Usually my office would be locked, empty, and I'd be out having a walk in the fresh air. Also at that time, I was being stalked by a local journalist, George Henderson, who wanted me to confirm that Cheltenham had something to do with the shooting. Many other things happened that were all part of setting me up as a patsy. My office colleague would often make a song and a dance about the fact that the union workers, the night shift, the communication officers, as we knew them as radio officers, although what they actually did was man teleprinters, they were sleeping in our office overnight. Also, my office colleague made a song and dance of me actually seeing their camp beds. The other thing that the Times didn't publish is that both my father and grandfather were London Metropolitan Police Constables. So I was completely set up as a patsy. And this was all at the time when GCHQ Cheltenham was looking to discredit the unions, because Margaret Thatcher was then Prime Minister. At the start of 1984, the government introduced a union ban at GCHQ Cheltenham. And if I'd confirmed to the local journalist, George Henderson, that GCHQ Cheltenham had something to do with the shooting, then that would have been the end of the campaign against the union ban. But I kept my mouth shut and walked away from him. So in 2014, I made it clear to the Times, the London Times, that it was obvious that I'd been set up as a patsy. Hence, it was equally obvious that WPC Yvonne Fletcher, when she was shot outside the Libyan embassy, then known as the Libyan People's Bureau, it was equally obvious that she was also a patsy, i.e. we had been complicit and involved in her murder. Absolutely no doubt about this. As documented at the time back in 1984 and later in the mid-90s by Richard Belfield and his team of investigators in the two-part documentary Dispatches, Murder in St James's, the bullet that killed WPC Yvonne Fletcher, because the trajectory of the bullet into her body was at an angle of between 60 and 70 degrees, and she was standing 25 yards in front of the Libyan embassy, there's no way that the bullet that killed WPC Yvonne Fletcher came from the Libyan embassy. So, and prior to January 2014, I actually wrote to our Prime Minister 6 months preceding publication of this article. I wrote to our Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, and saying that it was now blatantly obvious that I'd been set up as a patsy and that there needed to be an investigation. Actually, I'd been subjected to a several years of overt harassment, and I was seeking to get the story out into the press so I could be free from the ongoing harassment from my local police and British intelligence, so I could get back to living my life. So there was absolutely no excuse whatsoever for the Times cherry-picking my story and merely publishing a fragment of what happened that lunchtime. They should have printed something which was representative or printed nothing. I, of course, complained bitterly, because I was still being harassed and I don't regain my life. And of course, I started to work it out that the Times only printed what they printed because not only was I set up as a patsy back in 1984, but in 2014 I was set up as a patsy, but this time for the purposes of blackmail. Blackmail against the Americans and also blackmail against our own government, set up by British intelligence as an instrument of blackmail. I complained bitterly, both to the Times and also to the alleged Independent Press Complaints Commission. After many months of argument, the Times actually printed a correction and a clarification on the 4th of June 2014. And actually you can find it online. If you Google Mike Arnold and WPC Yvonne Fletcher, you will actually find this very small PDF copy of the Times article on the 4th of June 2014, which simply notes that I disagree with what they actually published at the start of the year. Doesn't explain why I disagree, doesn't explain the circumstances, doesn't even explain that both my father and my granddad were London Metropolitan Police constables, as if that wouldn't be of interest to the public. And this is on my birth certificate. It cannot be denied. So there's absolutely no doubt about it. I was set up as a patsy, and this was all for the purposes of blackmail. And I've been subjected, for the last 6 years, I've been subjected to ruthless ongoing harassment by both my local police and others. And this is all about blackmailing our government, the Americans, the White House, and I assume the US military. It's a little bit more complex because British intelligence have been very clever and very wicked. And you could argue that we pay them to be both very clever and very wicked. And indeed, they have certainly been that. Because through a series of very clever crime signatures, they've managed to link the bombing of Pan Flight 103 over Lockerbie and also what happened on 7/7, the alleged terrorist attack. They've also managed through crime signatures to link that to me as well. So there's absolutely no doubt about it that the murder of WPC Yvonne Fletcher, the bombing of Pan Flight 103 over Lockerbie, and indeed 7/7 were false flags. They were false flags. And that means we were complicit. It means we manipulated and organised. It means we knew what was going to happen and we allowed it to happen for political reasons. Now, British intelligence is milking it, and they're milking it through using me as their instrument of blackmail. Milking their asset. In industry, we call it milking your assets, and they're milking me. Of course, I'm now a walking dead man because I'm an instrument of blackmail, because I know the truth. You can go into Facebook, you can find me, you can download my evidence, you can download my account in detail, what happened at GCHQ Cheltenham. You can download my photographs, which explain at a high level the crime signatures. And you can also read up about 9/11, and you can read up about World Trade Center 7, and you can read about how it collapsed in a symmetrical and free-fall manner. And the only way that can happen is if it was a controlled demolition. So the bottom line is, in all of this, is that what's been happening in the world for the last 15 or so years, the global war on terrorism, it's bogus. It's completely bogus. It's all about vested interests. It's all about vested interests for the military-industrial complex in the US and to a lesser extent in the UK and indeed in Paris and France. They're all false flags. You've all been duped. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of my grandfather. He did a pensionable term in the London Metropolitan Police, a constable throughout all his time, and proud to have been one he was. He joined in the early 30s, served through the London Blitz, and took his pension sometime in the early 50s. The irony is, in his words, he took his pension when they started shooting police officers. His words. His worst time and best time in life was the London Blitz. But anyway, that's his story. But I have fond memories of my grandfather, and that's why they've set me up as a patsy. That's why they've set me up as their instrument of blackmail. I'm now a walking dead man. And what I've said to you has been done without any script, off the cuff. And it's the truth as I know it. And if you look at the evidence, British intelligence, there's so much supporting evidence that it's just undeniable what I'm saying to you. But I'm now a walking dead man. I need your help. So please circulate this video. Thank you.